Hello, everyone, and welcome to a live dispatch from home. I am Patricia Butler. I'm the co-founder of ArtistWorks. And if you don't know who we are an online music instruction company. We work with now 40 world-renowned musicians who teach online using what's unique to ArtistWorks that we refer to as video exchange. But these master musicians have come into our studios here in Napa, California, and recorded pretty much everything they know. Sometimes they do have to come back. So you learn, if you're a student here, from all of the lessons that are on the website, but you have the ability to send in a video to the teacher and they'll respond with the video and give you some feedback, and everybody else sees that video exchange as well. So at ArtistWorks, you get to learn from the recorded lessons and from the video exchanges. So we do something else here at ArtistWorks, and that is we have a podcast series, and we pick a topic and talk to a couple of different artists about that topic. And recently, we decided we were going to talk about how players of kind of all skill levels can develop their own musical voice. How can they develop their sound? And we're not talking about just the sound that the instrument makes, but really more on a, let's call it, a basis. What is their musical sound and how they express their musical voice? And so I turned with Noam Pekelny to discuss this. So there's a podcast that you can listen to about Noam's opinions and perspective and guidance on that. And I also talked to Guthrie Trapp. And Guthrie just has a lot of very valuable perspective on creating your own sound and how a player of really any level can go about doing that. So if for some reason you don't know who Guthrie Trapp is, he's not only a very high in-demand session player in Nashville of multiple instruments. It's very impressive how many he can play. He's performed with and toured with John Oates and as well as dobro icon Jerry Douglas. And, he's just really supported a lot of household names like Garth Brooks and, of course, Roseanne Cash and Lyle Lovett. He's also helped support and honor Billy Gibbons recently from ZZ Top. But he's also the teacher of the fastest growing course here at ArtistWorks. And when we brought this subject up, he thought that maybe he ought to talk to his friend, Audley Freed, who is the former lead guitarist from Black Crowes. He's shared the stage with Jimmy Page, in case you don't know that. Also played with the Dixie Chicks, and he's one of the founding members of Trigger Happy. And he lives in Nashville, and we thought it would be best to have him join Guthrie. They're practically neighbors, at least I say they're practically neighbors. And so welcome to what I expect to be a very insightful and musical conversation. We're going to get it started off right away. Some music, so I will just turn this over to Guthrie Trapp and Audley Freed. Yeah.
All right.
I loved it. I think you should name your band Trapped and Freed.
Well,
I've named it officially today, August 18th.
you might have something there, Patricia.
We've got our brand all sorted out.
Hey, so I gotta tell you real quick before we get going.
Sure.
So he was Audley was there all night for the Billy Gibbons thing. He was playing in the band, backing up everybody there.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
So that was a real treat. And Guthrie played wonderfully. Just he and Billy. And yeah, we got to play with a multitude of folks that were there to honor him. And for me, just to give you a little bit of background as far as that goes, I mean, I had him sign my copy of ZZ Top Fandango that I bought when I was in 8th grade. I still have that.
Oh my gosh.
And so his thing looms very, very large in my world on a lot of levels. And my band, I had a band in the 90s called Cry of Love that we had a couple records out on Columbia Records, and we did some touring opening for ZZ Top. But this was there was a lot more personal one-on-one time on this gig that we just did, and it was such a treat, such an honor. What
was the rest of that event like for both of you, Guthrie? I mean, I know that was really a proud moment for you. That was a big moment. What was the rest of it like?
It was pretty wild for me. I had just gotten back from New Orleans after riding out COVID for about 8 or 9 days down there, and I had gone down to New Orleans to stay for about a month. I was going to do some recording and stuff, and then of course that got all shut down when I got COVID. So when I recovered, I came back to Nashville, and I hadn't looked at an email or a text message other than with my mom to let her know I was still alive. I had kind of, put off a bunch of emails for about 2 weeks. And so I got back, and once I got settled back in Nashville and I realized I needed to catch up on everything, obviously, I went to the coffee shop one morning. I was feeling good, and I sat out there on a nice day and just started going through all the emails and stuff that I hadn't, addressed. And so I'm going through and deleting and looking at some stuff here and there. And I get down and I'm scrolling through, and I see the subject of one of the emails was Billy Gibbons. And I thought, well, this is interesting. I'd only met him one time, and I didn't grow up playing rock and roll. And so I didn't really know a whole lot. I obviously know about ZZ Top and stuff like that, but, wasn't really on my radar a lot. And so I thought, well, man, did I end up on the mailing list or something, and I almost deleted it. And then thank God I read the little bit farther. And so the email was dated like 6 or 7 days prior to that. And I thought, and so I read the email, and it's like, hey, this is Martine, and Billy had requested that you be a special guest on his show. And I thought, good Lord. So I immediately, texted, called, and emailed Martine right back. Absolutely. I'd love to do it. Of course, I'm flattered and surprised and everything. And so he called right back, and he goes, no, man, you're good. We're good. He goes, Billy will be thrilled that you can do it. And I ended up rehearsing with him, and I found out that Audley and Fred Eltringham and a couple other Nashville guys were in the house band. And I thought, well, this is great, man. I got, some local brothers
some
there,
compadres,
and some compadres. And so that worked out well. And Billy was just as cool as he could be. And he came up with this idea where he wanted me and him to play together. He was going to play the snare drum. And he said, man, I don't really want to work a whole lot out. I'm going to start a groove, and I want you to start playing. And so that's what we did. And I mean, it was just, it was totally cool. We did it out at the Opry House, and just a great day hanging with him and getting to know him better. And actually got to hang and meet and get to know one of my other heroes pretty good that day. And who turned out to be just an unbelievable dude was Jimmy Vaughn.
Oh, wow.
And so, being on stage with Audley as well, Audley and to look over and see Audley and Jimmy Vaughn and Billy Gibbons in my, peripheral there on the stage, I could have cared less who else was on stage at that point. I'm not going to name any names, but there was a couple of heavyweight kind of stars over to my right, and it didn't matter if they were there or not at that point.
So did it inspire you, or did it scare you?
No, I mean, at this point, I don't really get nervous that much anymore. Yeah. I just wanted to make sure that I went out there and kind of, you don't want to mess around for lack of a better term, in those situations. I mean, when you're on stage with those caliber dudes and like at the end of the show, we all did LaGrange and everybody soloed and soloed and soloed. And when I didn't think the night could get any cooler, Billy took a couple steps back and he whispered, this is like in the middle of LaGrange rocking out. He takes a couple steps back and he whispered in my ear and he goes, me and you gonna go last. And I thought, man, here we go. So that was, for him to say that was like taking the throttle and just pushing it all the way to the ground. And so,
what an experience.
When it came time to solo, I mean, I'm not going to go start doing a bunch of finger tapping or anything, but it's time to kind of like, you got one shot to kind of, play your ass off, and that's hopefully what you can do. What you do.
And it happened. Well, that's really very, very cool. I'm happy for both of you. What an iconic moment, right?
It was really great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Well, maybe that's a good way to step off into this conversation about creating your own sound. I mean, talk about an iconic sound.
Hey, one real quick thing I want to.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Before you move on, is the name of that band is actually Trigger Hippie.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
That's all right.
I said Trigger Happy.
That's all right. I just wanted to make a note of that.
I'm sorry. I don't even want to come back on the screen now.
No.
I'm so humiliated.
No, come on.
I actually typed hippie, but I said happy.
We're happy to be here.
Thank you for forgiving me. So, all right, we're talking about a little bit about ZZ Top there, and I don't want to overuse the word an iconic sound, but I mean that really it's become a classic sound, and that's what our topic is about today: is how can players create their own sound? I mean, maybe the bar is a little high if you want to sound like ZZ Top. But, Guthrie, we had a great conversation, or at least started the conversation in the podcast. And just remind everybody, you can go to artistworks.com/podcast and listen to that podcast about creating your own sound. But, you had some really interesting advice, and I think shared some interesting philosophies as well. I often thought, and now I understand wrongly, that it was smart to kind of dance on your father's shoes when you're trying to develop your own sound. But is there a point where you step off those shoes, or should you maybe never get on them in the first place? What's your thought on that?
I kind of think that, if when you're first learning, I think it's really important to have these icons that we look up to and that are our big influences. And sometimes I call that the Mount Rushmore of guitar players that we're probably all going to agree on some level. If you put all the guitar players on the planet in one room, there's maybe 5 guys that we're all going to agree on that are pretty influential, right?
Genre specific.
Yeah. And then
absolutely.
And then from there, I think, and I also to add where I'm going with that is, I think it's really important to learn some note for note transcribing, if you will, or learning off records or something like that when you're learning, because at some point, if you want to create those sounds that you're inspired by, you do have to figure out where their hands are on the fingerboard and how they're attacking the guitar to get those sounds. And just learning how to play some blues licks and stuff like that, you have to start somewhere to learn some of these lines and some of these licks, and unless you're just maybe a genius and you come up with your own stuff, and that's a different story. But I think that like the Mount Rushmore of influences, and then as your ear progresses and you're learning, you start learning your instrument, hopefully you're going to get into listening to a bunch of different kinds of music if you enjoy that. And then your influences are going to be like a family tree, and they're going to start getting more and more and more unique as you go along. So I know me and Audley would probably agree on a bunch of guitar players that we love, but then if we talk for a longer amount of time, I'm going to drift off into maybe some different territory, bluegrass and Latin music.
Sure.
And he's going to drift off into some stuff that he really likes that I might not have even ever heard of. And that's going to help shape his sound, and it's going to help shape my sound as an individual. And that's why me and him are going to be able to work in Nashville, because we're all bringing something different and unique to the table, right? I mean, kind of in a nutshell, that's my take on it.
Yeah, I think that you're exactly right. I think the thing that you have to be mindful of when you're, I think that Guthrie's exactly right. I think it's really good to learn solos, rhythm parts that appeal to you from the people that are speaking to you in a manner that really resonates emotionally, if that makes any sense. I think that what I would say, the number one thing there is, and I actually heard Billy Gibbons say this once years ago, speaking of that, is that learn the things that you like to listen to. Try to learn how to do that first and foremost. I think, to your point, though, it's very important to not become an imitator or just someone who apes someone else's sound. We've all seen that, with a lot of iconic guitar players, where it's obvious that the person is playing something where they're basically just trying to do somebody else's trip. So I think that's a minefield. Well, that's not really the right way to put it, but that's a trap you don't want to fall into. I've often found that, just like Guthrie said, we could talk for hours and hours about this, but if you just, the things that bring you joy, try to figure out how to do that. And if your intentions are, I shouldn't say right, but if you are, if you believe enough in yourself somehow, or maybe like me, are just too lazy to push it any further, you'll take those things and turn them in. You'll take those sentences and make your own paragraphs with them, or take those words and make your own sentences with them. So I know for me, concepts and actual licks and things, I have learned a lot of things off records, but I've always, for some reason, just kind of wandered off the path and monkeyed with it until it became something that was maybe my own.
I really like what you said there. And it's something that I think either Guthrie or Noam brought up as well. And that is that, quoting once in a while is fine, quoting someone else's music. But at some point, you can't have a conversation, especially a musical conversation, if it's nothing but quotes, nothing but cliches, nothing but statements that have already been made by somebody else. So there's got to be a way for, let's say, intermediate players to develop their own, style, perhaps. And I guess I'll ask Guthrie this. What do you think are the first steps that intermediate players should take to start hearing in their head a sound that is perhaps expressive of themselves? What do you think they should do first?
I kind of going back to what Audley said, which I totally agree with, and I think I've said similar things on these before, is definitely don't learn anything you don't enjoy because somebody told you that you should learn those. Like if you're into blues rock and somebody's trying to get you to learn a bunch of classical guitar, you may or may not be into it, but definitely don't spend any time learning something that you don't enjoy just because you think you have to. I went down that path when I moved to Nashville and thought I was going to, play on like all these really commercial records and I thought, the brass ring here was being like, guitar player of the year, playing on all these country records. And I really quickly found out that real fast that I didn't enjoy that music, and I'm not good at it. I'm not good at playing guitar that doesn't sound like the guitar because I don't enjoy it. And so I really enjoy a lot of American roots music, and then African music and some Cuban music and things like this that I can trace to the blues, and then has some really good heart and soul to it, real country music, bluegrass. And so that's where I ended up being, I guess, decent in the areas that I really, really enjoyed, and that I could feel like I could kind of, gravitate towards and play. And so I'd say, start by just, learn, play as much music along to as many records in the vein that you're really digging. And so as far as setting out to create your own sound, that's not something that I ever did.
I never intellectualized that.
I never intellectualized that, and I never heard a sound in my head that I wanted to like try to find. I kind of used the gear and the guitars and stuff that worked for me and that made sense to me. So I think it's interesting. There's producers like that too. There's producers that hear these sounds in their head and they know how to tell all the players exactly what to play to create these records that they can really hear and map out. And then in Nashville, a lot of times there's producers that just know how to call the right guys for the right vibe of the music, and then they stay out of the way and don't tell them anything, and they just let the things happen.
They're great casting directors.
They're great casting directors, and so I think there's something to be said for that. I think it just kind of has to happen as your ear develops as a musician and these influences start affecting you. It's going to be a long process, but you're going to end up kind of where you need to be. I don't think there's a forced way to do it.
I really like what you're saying there, because very goal oriented and process oriented. And what you're saying is that maybe that ought not to be a goal, but that it's something that evolves and develops. Here are some steps you can take to broaden your musical taste, like listening beyond your genre. And I would imagine listening to musicians, different kinds of musicians as well, or different instruments. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, and I'm going to let Audley answer that too. But one thing I will say is I think it's like to equate it to teaching. You can't teach anybody how to feel something or how to have soul, but you can point them in the right direction of the things that have allowed you to feel those things and to have some soul. So I always try to tell people, no matter what genre of music, two things. No matter what genre of music that you want to play on the guitar, it's really important to get a good understanding of the blues, and then B, I forgot what B is, but
then go to C.
Okay, one, definitely check out the blues. I'd say the blues is something that you need to check out, even if you think you might not. But you'd really do. And then the next thing is learn enough fundamentals to where you actually know a little bit of what you're doing, some basic theory on the guitar. It's really important to know what you're doing a little bit and then go from there. Those two things I think are really important.
Audley, did you have anything to add to that?
If you would be kind enough to repeat what I'm adding to, I certainly do.
Yeah, well, all we were saying is that I think that Guthrie made a very valid point in that maybe you don't have a goal that you write down in your practice plan if you're writing them down. Okay, I'm going to develop my own style. I'm going to develop my own sound today. It's not actually a written goal. Just I was saying, how does one allow it to evolve? And I guess that's, what we're talking about.
Sure.
And Guthrie was saying, listen broadly to not just your favorite players, but to different kinds of music. And I guess I was asking, should you listen to different instruments as well?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll circle back to that in a second. Yet again, like we were saying earlier, it just kind of happened for me that I never had a goal, like we said. It was always neck down for me when I was a kid. I never thought I'm going to do this and contribute to my own style of playing. Luckily, I guess I just had some kind of instinct that led me to a place through just the things that moved me and trying to repeat that and then trying to make up a bunch of my own stuff that I would enjoy hearing or that I thought sounded good. So that was kind of, it's a bit mysterious. And I think that maybe the indefinable nature of that, as with a lot of things in music, is what makes it special. Sometimes I'm not talking about my personal guitar playing. I'm talking about the actual process of having that come about. There's a little magic in there, don't you think?
Totally.
Yeah. And so,
But
having said that, I think there are definitely things that you can do. I think being a broad listener is very important. And, there are techniques that you can employ that I'm sure that you guys have maybe spoken about, very simple things like just rhythmic displacement, learn a lick off of a record that if the first note of the lick is on the downbeat, just move it over an eighth note and play the first lick on the upbeat, so all of a sudden you took somebody else's lick, but you just made a different lick out of it. And these things, I don't know, over time, they begin to coalesce and you begin to call on them when you're improvising. I will say that I was lucky enough to have been a child when there was a lot of diverse music on the radio.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that, I mean, Sly and the Family Stone 1 minute, ZZ Top the next, Al Green the next, the Spinners the next, Yes the next, Neil Young the next. When you are riding around in your parents' car, you're listening, even though those things are all falling under the broad heading of like popular music, American popular music, you're getting a whole lot of information there, and it's one-stop shopping, and so I think as a kid that was really, really good for me because I heard a lot of great singers, and I heard a lot of people playing a lot of different kinds of guitar-based music, and even music that wasn't guitar-based that brought me a lot of joy. And so yet again, I think in some cases without consciously taking from that, just the fact that it's in here somewhere because it resonated when it resonated at an age when, you're developing and these things, you're processing them at such a rapid rate, So and then later in life, I will say that broadening my listening habits it was very important, not just stylistically, but on different instruments. And like you were saying, I think singers are real important as far as phrasing goes.
Totally.
Sure. Oh yeah. I think that's a great point. And I've heard so many musicians say that, play with singers, listen to singers, because they've got that phrasing that and they have to carry the melody, and there's so much to learn from how a singer, delivers a song. Vibrato, all of that.
All those things.
So sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Nashville will really instill that in you pretty quickly when you move here. If you're not already a song fan, Nashville is it's a song town. And so we kind of learned, you learn pretty quick, especially if you go do sessions, that they want to hire somebody that has a lot of horsepower and knows that it's there, but they want the guy that can really restrain and know how to, really back up a singer. And if it just means playing a big diamond on a guitar with some tremolo, and you might hit one note at one chord and let that ring for, 8 bars or whatever it is, they want that. And so it kind of dials you in and makes you laser focus on what great songs are and great singers. And I think all that stuff contributes to.
No, absolutely. Too, yeah. I'll say for me too, I love drummers, and I think that has weaved its way into my playing without me consciously trying to have that happen. It just is in there somewhere every now and then.
Yeah.
And also I love like busy R&B bass playing from the late 60s and early 70s. And I, even though I can't play a note of it, I'm terrible at it. Well, I can play a note of it. I just can't play it very well. But that lives up here as far as the syncopations go and the rhythm, and this, and so when you're improvising, I think that informs some things for me personally too. Even so that's an osmosis thing, because I never really sat down and studied what was happening there. I just really like it,
You're incubating it. It sounds to me like you're saying you're taking it in and you're incubating it, and it could come out at some point, just because you've internalized it. And we've also said, listen broadly, and learn to play the music you love, will help. So I think we've given 3 good pieces of advice. And maybe now we could hear you guys play some of the music that you love. And then we've got questions from several folks, and while you're playing it, maybe we'll give them a moment to ask a few more. So could we just impose upon you to perhaps play some music for us for a few minutes?
Yeah. He mentioned R&B, which I'm
Okay.
the same. If I go out and listen to a band, I love listening to the bass player and the drummer, and I'm the same man.
Especially if it's a bass player and drummer that I like.
Especially if it's a good one, and we're looking at some really great ones. And I'm the same. I love listening. It's so funny you mentioned that, because I love listening to that old, the Donny Hathaway Live with Willie Weeks playing, and then James Jamerson, and I mean the list goes on and on. Those are the two obvious answers, those two guys. But I love that bass playing too. It's moving, and it's interesting, and it's funky and groovy, and the tone is so great on those old P basses. But it still supports the song, and it's not busy. They're not overplaying.
Sometimes they are really overplaying, but it never gets in the way.
Right,
Because Jamerson's thing was not with the kick drum; it was playing with the singer.
Yeah,
following the vocal line, and it could get super busy, but boy, it sounds great.
It sounds great.
It does not detract. It really adds.
So maybe with that in mind, we'll play an R&B. I'll just
do it.
We're gonna start, and then we'll let him play. So maybe we'll get an A and do like a. Let's see. Let me get my thing going here. How about a?
Never enough music, but thank you. I loved it. That was great. You guys play so well together. So are we okay to maybe take a few questions? Would that be okay?
Yeah, bring it on.
Love it.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I want to go back to one of the first ones. Well, let me just find this one here. One question that Kevin asked, this is a rather lengthy one. Did you both ever have a moment where you consciously thought about trying to sound like yourself on the guitar versus sounding like your heroes? Or were there kind of steps in between that allowed it to happen naturally? I think you maybe have answered that it was never like a goal. But do you want to clarify that at all or speak to that further?
Well, yeah, it was not a goal for me. I don't think that, like I said, I don't think that, quite frankly, that I was thinking 5 minutes beyond where I was at the time as a kid, so not just about music, but about anything.
Okay. I think we kind of covered that one. So that's good. From one of our YouTube viewers, this is for Guthrie. What Cuban music do you like, and how did you get it into your listening style? I'm kind of curious about this too. You've mentioned it multiple times. How did the Cuban music or the Latin music influence you, and what did you listen to? The Buena Vista Social Club?
Great question. Yeah, that record's really great. So when I was lucky to grow up on the Gulf Coast, on the Alabama-Florida state line, and the thing that was unique about that area was there was a bar down there called the Floribama, and they had a big songwriters festival, and they had music down there all the time, and they really supported original music, singers and songwriters, and that was our kind of direct link to Nashville, even way before I thought I'd ever move to Nashville. And so that combined with my family having really good taste in music, and my uncle being a self-taught musician, and that area attracted a lot of people that normally might not show up in, say, Dothan, Alabama, or somewhere like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I ended up starting a band with this guy from New York, and ended up meeting a bunch of his friends and these guys that were, that were just a little, they were from New York, and they were into playing jazz and funk and R&B and stuff like that. And I grew up playing bluegrass and more roots music. And so this kind of, these guys started turning me on to stuff. And so that combined with being a big Ry Cooder fan because of my uncle and having pop records around on vinyl and stuff. And then when Ry started doing all the Buena Vista Social Club, it was a natural, listening, going to listen to that stuff, and just got hip to like the cats that were playing on those records, and started listening to guys like the classics like Tito Puente and Chucho Valdez, and then Ruben Gonzalez on the piano, and guys like Cachao and these, just all the got to where I knew the players, and not personally, but knew who these guys were playing on these records. And that music just really, it hit home with me. I don't know. That music is very, you can't just go sit in with those guys. There's things that have to be, it's almost like a bluegrass band. If everybody's playing a part, and if it's not right, it pretty quick. And those guys know. I mean, you got to be able to count the clave and all that stuff. But
like Indian music and some East African or West African music.
Yeah, it's a total different thing. And for some reason, I gravitate towards it. I love it. And to me, it's like a musical buffet. There's soul, there's rhythm, there's harmonic content, there's amazing percussion. The vocalists are soulful. To me, that's like all the boxes are checked with that music for me. And so even more than like the Brazilian music, which is incredible, but it's a little prettier. The Cuban stuff and the West African stuff to me is my favorite, because it's a little darker, a little more minor, bluesier vibe, the Montunos and stuff like that. And so I just started kind of, like he said, I mean, I couldn't agree more. I think, if you like something, learn it. You don't have to transcribe an entire Wes Montgomery solo, but if you find one line in there or one lick in there that you like, just learn that and incorporate it into your playing. That's what I've always done. I've kind of always just grabbed little pieces of maybe Roy Buchanan if I liked a little thing there. I didn't try to sound exactly like him, because I think in a way it's almost disrespectful to think that I'm going to grab my guitar and be able to play just like somebody else. First of all, we physically can't do it. We don't have the same equipment. And then it goes like reverse from there. It goes inside. We don't have the same hands. We don't have the same soul. We don't have the same brain. And so to try to sound like just one other person, it's just not, it's never going to happen. It's like moving to Nashville and trying to sound like the top session guy working the most that year. It's just never going to happen, because those guys are already doing themselves better than anybody else is ever going to do it. And so I just always tried to grab little pieces from here and there. But the Cuban stuff is just, I don't know, man. I don't know how to count that stuff, but I just feel.
Can you play a little bit? I mean, is there a little something in there, Guthrie, that might help us understand what the influence you're talking about?
Some of those little things I'll incorporate, even in like even if I'm doing like a country train beat. When I used to play down at with Don Kelly and those guys, we they do a couple of tunes that were really upbeat train stuff, and I'd put up like the Cuban Montuno over like the 5 chord. If it goes to E7, if I'm playing over an E7 or an E9, like the 5, that's like over an E9 or an E7. Go to D7. That's all over D7. So it just seems like those territories to me are related, and they work, and it gives you something a little bit ear bending. It's a little bit more interesting, maybe.
So all arpeggio based, right? Pretty much.
I'm just kind of basing that off some arpeggios and some scales. So if I play a E9 chord,
right,
the top part of that E9 chord is a B minor
right, sure,
triad.
Sure.
And so I'm just going to go B minor, and then to that major third. It makes it basically at that point I'm playing over the E7. So all that, like, you know, all that is an E9 to me, right?
Right, sure.
And so that that little piece of you know, that's just one little example of like a montuno, they would call that. But I throw that in all the time over all kinds of stuff. Any place I can get away with it.
Well, that's great. Thank you for sharing that. I'm sorry, Audley, were you going to say something there and I stepped right on you?
No. Absolutely.
Okay. All right. So we had a couple of other questions here, other than some very rude trollers, and you know.
Yeah, that was an odd one.
Well, he's gone now.
Right.
Let me just get this up here, because I think this is really a good question, and I am just a wee bit partial to it. And hang on, so sorry. Yeah, now there's a lot of stuff I got to get through here. This is a question for both of you from David. What guitarists do you think belong in the guitarist Mount Rushmore that you referenced there, Guthrie? You said there's the Mount Rushmore.
I painted myself into a corner there.
Didn't I?
Well,
you got a couple hours to make that.
Take a vote.
That list.
That's going to be a big mountain.
But oddly, let's do it by genre. So go right ahead.
I was just saying there's so many. It's almost hard to start because you just can't stop, and you're inevitably going to leave out somebody that's, you know.
It really is, and like you said earlier, it is kind of the guitar is so broad that it is kind of genre specific almost.
Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
And the other thing is, there's going to be the guys that are obviously the ones that are the most visible, and maybe have had a tremendous amount of impact. But really, it's about visibility,
Right.
You know, and impact
Yeah.
that everybody is going to name.
Yeah.
The Jimi Hendrixes and the Jeff Becks and and on and on and on. BB King, obviously, you know.
Right.
But it's such an individual thing.
Mhm.
I find, you
Yeah.
know, that it's to make a comprehensive list is kind of like impossible.
It's the hardest question.
They do it in Rolling Stone all the time, but it's just not. It's like,
Yeah.
it's not really.
Well, I'll say this too. I always say, and so I don't know who told me this a long time ago, but I always remembered it. And it's like, okay, let's just use this for an example, because it is a pretty good one, because he was such a copied guy. Like, if you love Stevie Ray Vaughan and that's your guy, then at some point you need to go back and listen to the guys that he listened to get to where he was. And so
Yeah.
if you love Stevie Ray Vaughan, you're probably going to love Jimi Hendrix, and you're probably going to love Albert King, and you're going to love Albert Collins, and you're going to love, Kenny Burrell. I mean, he stole a lot of stuff from a lot of people too. And so I say, if you really love somebody, dig deep and go as far back as you can with those influences. If you love, that to me, I look at it like a family tree. And so if this is your guy up here, then go down and find how broad those influences can go from there. It's kind of a fun thing to do.
It's super fun. I just found out, I mean, this week actually, that the Stevie Ray had that band Blackbird that was like an Allman Brothers band.
Wow. Yeah.
Allman Brothers style band, and he played a lot of slide guitar in that group.
See, I didn't know that.
And you don't hear it, in what he developed into.
Right.
I never really hear that, but it is fascinating.
Yeah, for sure.
Here's a fun fact, going back to the Cuban thing. That's
Okay.
funny. Billy Gibbons did a record called Perfecto Mundo.
Mm-hmm.
And so when we were talking on the phone for the first time that Sunday, I told him, I said, hey, Billy, I said, I got to tell you, man, I really love that record that you did, Perfectamundo, because that's like his Cuban Latin influenced record, which is a really cool record. And so, and he told me, he goes, oh yeah, man. He goes, I love that stuff. He goes, not many people know this, but he said when he was a kid and he was banging on, literally, he said, banging on pots and pans with pencils, his dad was a big arranger and conductor and all this kind of stuff. And so he told me that when he was a kid, his dad said, hey man, if you're going to do this, we're going to do it right. He sent him to New York and he lived with Tito Puente for like 2 months.
Holy cow.
Learned how to play all the Cuban percussion stuff. So
that's so cool.
Listen to the Perfectamundo record by Billy Gibbons and the BFGs. Billy's playing a lot of those timbali parts and stuff on there that you hear, and it's awesome.
That's very cool. Well, our conversation today is about the sound that you make. And when I first started the top of this event, we said this is not necessarily about the sound of your instrument. It's about your musical sound in general. But I think that you're today playing a pretty interesting and fascinating guitar there, Guthrie. So why don't we talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, we can talk about both of them. But
because I remember in the sound check that Audley was talking about something very unique with his guitar too, which is a Collins, I believe.
It is a Collins.
Yeah. So let's chat about guitars.
Well, real quick, I'll say this because while he's talking about his, I'm gonna take this opportunity to use the restroom really fast.
Okay.
Put it up there where everybody can ooh and ah over it.
And so
I'm saying when you go to the restroom.
Oh yeah. So this is a real 1959 Gibson 335 that I do not own. My buddy brought this by to let me play for a while because he knows I've got a lot of guitars in the shop right now. And so he goes, well, man, just play this one. So he brought this by, and I've been playing it for the past week or so. And a good buddy of ours, session monster here, and just a great guy, great musician named Tom Bukovac. He owned this guitar for a while and then sold it to a friend of ours. And then so now he's got it and kind of on the fence of whether or not he wants to sell it or not. But it's a really great guitar. It's just the real deal. It plays really evenly and amazingly all the way up the neck. And it's just I don't get a chance to play guitars like this very often because it's worth a lot of money. So but yeah, it's kind of cool to play a real one. We've all got these reissues and stuff, but this is the real thing.
I'll say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hand it over.
Oh, all right. Well, we're going to bring, because I don't know as much about your guitar and I know Kevin does, I'm going to go ahead and let you two have a conversation about your interesting guitar, Audley. So you guys go ahead.
Sure. Go ahead, Kevin. Oh, I can't hear you, man. I can't.
Audley, just being on here. Sorry, I didn't realize.
No,
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, well, as long as it wasn't my fault, man.
Yeah, no, not you, sir. That was all me. But my name's Kevin Harvey here, just for everyone tuning in. I'm the content marketing manager here at ArtistWorks and a fellow guitar nut. So, Audley, this has been a lot of fun just watching you and Guthrie and listening to you guys chat. And yeah, man, we were talking about your callings backstage here earlier. So, yeah, what's the deal with this instrument, man? I know it's pretty unique, you were saying.
Yeah, it's an I-30, which normally is their take on a fully hollow instrument that has P90 pickups that you've heard the antecedent, I guess is that the right word? But like on Beatle records and stuff.
Yeah.
And really chimey, cool guitars. Well, I got one of those about 4 years ago, I guess, 3 or 4 years ago, and really fell in love with it. The idea, I mean, the fact that it's a hollow instrument does kind of make it a little bit limited in a live setting. Not so much because of the feedback, but really that could be an issue sometimes. But the sustain on notes when you're playing solos, is not going to be what a guitar with a center block would give you. So they were kind enough. I like that guitar so much. they were kind enough to build me an I-30, which is the same instrument as the hollow one, but with a center block.
Yeah.
So it was a bit of an experiment. And so far, it's been a pretty successful one. I have had this guitar out. I had it out this past weekend I played in Sheryl Crow's band, and we were out doing some shows, and I was out using it. I'm still going to monkey with the pickups a little bit, but the guitar plays fantastically, and it sounds really good acoustically. And I'm a big fan. It has some soul right out of the box. If that makes sense, you know. And I like the trapeze, tailpiece. The scale length on these guitars is a little longer than a Gibson scale length, so there's a bit more snap.
Oh, interesting.
You know, and it makes them, they're not quite as slinky. They don't play quite as slinky because of scale length, but there's a little more top and there's a little more information sort of in the high mids and the top end, I think, because the scale is longer, which is one of the reasons that Fender guitars are brighter than Gibson guitars, right? You know, along with a few other factors. I feel like this tailpiece kind of tamps that down a little bit and maybe evens it out a little bit more than if you just had a regular stop tail that was screwed into the center block. So it's new to me, and it's been really, and it's fun to get a guitar that is new, that is inspiring and makes you want to pick it up and play. Makes you want to play anyway, but to specifically pick this up and play it. Yeah, I've been having some fun with it. You know?
Absolutely. I mean, it's a beautiful guitar and an interesting guitar, kind of combining some of the elements of, you know, a 335 style instrument with a center block with the 330 style guitar that's, you know, fully hollow. Very cool.
And interestingly enough, and I'm not really versed enough in the minutia of the design, but they make an I-35 also, which is very much like the guitar that Guthrie was just showing you.
Yeah.
For some reason, so you might say, well, why didn't you just get one of those and put some P90 pickups in it? Well, the neck angle is different on this guitar. There's a bunch of construction things, properties, or what have you, with this particular model that is different from that.
Yeah.
And I really like that other one that I had, and so that's why I wanted to see, you know, if they could make one with the center block, but with all the construction of the I-30.
Yeah. So this is sort of a, you know, a funny thing that you guys have both kind of mentioned in passing, actually, but you know, it's funny how the gear can influence your sound, and then you also have influence over the gear, obviously, as the player. So, you know, with this particular guitar, Audley, and this is actually a question for both of you guys, is, you know, what about, say, the P90 sound or the semi-hollow characteristic? Like, what about that kind of drew you in as as part of your sound, or why you choose that kind of gear?
Well, I can point to let's start here. The biggest factor is that I do have a sound that one specific sound that I sort of start my whole thing with, and it's really sort of that edge of breakup rock and roll guitar sound. You know, it's a very cliche thing to say, but you know, it's really, there's a lot of clarity, and I like a lot of chime in it, and I can point you to some touchstones that are on records. You know, there's some Pete Townsend things, some Who things, very specific. I won't bore you with the specific things. There Malcolm Young went to AC/DC. There's some things on some Big Star records, which ironically enough, some of that was played on the 330. You know, there's a bunch of songs that I could point to. The funny thing is that they all don't really sound alike, but there's something in there that there's a thread there, even though the guitars are different, the amps are different. So I kind of like to start there, and if it sounds good playing cowboy chords to me, and I can beat it with my right hand and get a lot of clarity, but a really good big rock and roll sound, that works really well for me. And the P90 really helps to do that. And it's also a really versatile pickup when you back it off the volume. It cleans up a little bit. Plus the P90, if you add a little bit of front end to put a distortion pedal on it for playing solos or whatever, you can get into some really like that Mick Ralphs and Leslie West or super overdriven Les Paul Jr. territory, right?
Yeah.
The neck pickup, but the reason I like it in a hollow guitar is because I can get that out of it, but then I can also, go in between these two pickups and go to the neck pickup, and you can get a really sort of hard, like almost like Little Milton sort of like blues neck pickup overdriven, when those guys would just go to the neck pickup and plug into a Fender amp and turn it on 10. And so you can kind of combine. You're not going to get. I would say that I'm more successful with the bridge pickup and the rhythm sound than I am with the other thing, because you got to, if you're going to do that and play on your neck pickup all night, you got to EQ your amp for that, and by the time you do that and you go back to that bridge pickup, it's like Ice Pick City, you know what I mean? So there are compromises if you're just using one instrument, but I got a Les Paul Gold Top, a 54 reissue that's two P90s that I sort of apply the same principles to that, but I kind of like the neck pickup sound with the hollow body more. So.
Yeah. Well, that's always why you got to have a bunch of guitars, right?
You got to have a bunch. But we're talking about sound, and I'm quite happy to have the conversation get toward gear, because it's interesting to every player, regardless of their skill level. What about a pedal board? You guys use pedals a lot, and if you do, what have you got? And Kevin, thank you so much for those questions. Kevin is, of course, our content manager and all of that at ArtistWorks, but he comes from Seymour Duncan, so he knows a lot about equipment and gear and such. Kevin, great questions, and thank you for that conversation.
Great, man.
Thank you, guys. Yeah, definitely a gear nut. So this was fun for me just to hear about gear and see a 59. So this was a blast.
It's awesome. It's awesome.
Hear about Audley's custom calling. So thanks for being a part of this, guys. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
so what about the pedal boards? Is there anything to talk about there?
I've been running my mouth.
Oh no. So I do have some pedal boards that I use, and I will say that my favorite thing is I like 335s and Telecasters. Those are my kind of two main things that I like, and I tend to gravitate towards more traditional stuff. I don't have any digital pedals or digital amps or guitars with a lot of knobs and switches on them. And I used to have a rule that I joked about, but it's pretty true, is if it's got more than, like 4 knobs on it, I don't really mess with it. Now I do have a delay pedal over here with a bunch of stuff on it, but I set it one way and I kind of forget it. But there's just, if I have gear that has a lot of options, I'm distracted and I'm worried about if I've got it set right.
That's option anxiety, right?
It's option anxiety. And so the thing I love about a Telecaster is it's the least amount of moving parts. You've got 2 pickups, much like the 335. You've got 2 pickups and you've got a volume and a tone. And I'm pretty lazy. I turn my volume and my tone wide open on everything. I'm not a volume knob rider. And so I just use my right hand for dynamics. And so I like to use a Fender amp with reverb, and I like to get a nice clean on the edge of breakup tone where the amp feels good. So on a blackface Fender, usually around 4.5 to start on the gig. And then if I need a little bit more gain for a solo or something, I'll hit it with like on this pedal board I'm looking at down here. I keep looking at the floor. I got a tuner, a Boss tuner, and then I go into a RC booster, like a clean boost.
I'm a big fan of the RC boost myself.
Yeah, great pedal. And then I'll go into a vintage Nobles overdrive, and then into a tremolo and a delay, and then I'm out. But I never will have all these on at the same time. I'm using one for one thing and one for another, because I'll go from playing some kind of jazzy single note lines on the front pickup, and then the next song might warrant a little bit more aggressive sound on the back pickup. So it is nice to have a little bit of a tonal platform. I always sound the same no matter what. I
That's
mean,
the gift, man. That's
you
what
know,
you're supposed to try
You
for.
always sound good.
I guess, yeah.
Audley, talk a little bit about your amp. I think you guys are both, you're going old school today, playing from the same amp, but you have something unique about the amps that you used to use Germano. I'm sorry.
I still have one of Greg Germino. Yeah, I'm from North Carolina. He's a North Carolina homie.
Oh.
He makes really, really. Have you ever had one, Guthrie?
No, but they sound incredible.
His Marshalls he makes like Marshall style amps. I've got one. I don't get the chance to use it live very much because it's loud. I mean, by today's definition of loud, by when I grew up's definition of loud, it wasn't loud. But
yeah.
You know what, my preferred, like I said, going back to what we were discussing earlier, I don't really, it's all about the result to me. And I know that certain things will work to get there, but I'm also, if I can get there with another piece of gear that I wouldn't have considered or whatever, that's going to work too. But I really am partial to. I like sort of Vox sound, AC30, sort of build on that type sound. British amps, high watt-ish sound, but I also love Tweed Fender amps too, and just gnarly, like going circling back to the Billy Gibbons thing. Although I think he did a lot of stuff with the Brown Deluxe, but I those things, it's very traditional. Absolutely, yeah.
It's a great sound. You guys both have great sounds, and I'd like to hear a little bit more of it.
I'll tell you what. I'll add one thing to that, and I want to see if Audley agrees. And this might help some listeners out there, because I struggled with this when I was younger, and you move to Nashville and you're influenced by all these guitar players, and you start chasing some things when you're younger. And so what I realized was, and kind of the same thing. We like old, kind of pretty traditional sounds that things are based on, that are just classics, and there's I think there's a reason for it. But if you have, if you can, try not to make a Les Paul into a Telecaster, or try not to make a Strat into a 335. If you want these classic examples of these instruments, if you really love Stratocasters, try to get a Fender Strat. If you love Gibsons, try to get a Gibson 335. When you start putting, and there's exceptions to this rule, but just my kind of experience is, you're not going to make a Fender Princeton Reverb sound like a 100-watt Marshall. It's probably not going to happen. And so if you're looking for these things, just realize that if you spend a lot of time with a guitar that you don't like, trying to make it into something else, changing pickups, changing tuners, changing bridges and stuff like that, eventually just get rid of it and start over and get something else that works. That's my experience.
Yeah, I think.
And there's exceptions, of course.
There are exceptions, but I'd say by and large, that's the case. I was always a guy that wanted to just play. I told a friend of mine years and years ago, I was like, man, I just want to find one guitar and one amp and be done with it.
Right.
Now, that's what I thought at the time, because of the option anxiety and all that. It's turned into a little more than that, but I'd say that idea stays with me.
Interesting. Yeah. Very great.
Another thing I'll add to that,
yeah, Guthrie,
real quick, just to get people thinking a little bit, is I think for us, gear can be an obsession, and you can get on your computer and you can look at all these amazing looking amps and guitars, and then when you go play them, a lot of times they're not that great. They all look cool online, but you really it's hard to find good amps and good guitars. And so gear can be a little bit of a distraction. And so all that we strive for as musicians with our gear is for us to not be distracted by and inhibited by its limitations. Mm-hmm. And so all I want in a guitar and an amp is for it to feel right, and for me to be able to go play it and hopefully be inspired, but definitely not be restricted by a guitar that's like, I can't play up past the 12th fret because I can't bend on it or something like that. You
don't want to feel like that you're fighting any more than you want to fight.
Exactly. Right? So to obsess over the perfect pedal or the perfect guitar or the perfect whatever, that's, of course, we're all going to strive for that. But if you can just find something that's quote unquote good enough, then just take what you have and go into your music room and start playing the guitar. Don't think like, and we do this in a lot of aspects of our life. It's like, hey, I just want to I want a new car because my neighbor just got a new car. It's like, it's never going to make you happy. So eventually just grab the guitar that you have, go in and start learning how to play it.
Yeah.
Play it.
Yeah.
Try to bring yourself some
Right. Don't be a collector, be a player, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much for really a fabulous conversation today. You've just taken it to depths that I have to admit I hadn't anticipated. You've got, I think, probably another hour's worth of advice and guidance, but we probably ought to end on a musical note. You've been talking so much about Cuban music, Montuno, all of that. Can we hear something to take us out musically with? Can we hear some music?
I don't know. We could. Let's see. I don't know what that would be. Let's see if we can.
Yeah, I'm not.
I don't know.
Well, you'll figure something out. It doesn't have to be Latin music. Whatever you guys would like to play. I'm sorry I laid down the gauntlet, but all this Cuban talk made
Maybe
me
we'll do
think.
something like a little rumba, just like a 1 to the 5.
Like
I feel like going home and having a mojito.
All right. I guess we did our job then, Patricia.
Yeah, it works out just fine. Oh my goodness, what a wonderful hour, and thank you, Kevin, for joining us. Really appreciate you being able to bring some cred to that gear conversation. I really appreciate that. Audley, what a wonderful guest you've been. I hope that you'll join us again. And Guthrie, thank you for a wonderful conversation that I think is going to be helpful and valuable to not only your students at ArtistWorks, but also everybody who listens. So thank you all for joining us. If you want to hear the entire event all over again. This will stay up on YouTube and on Facebook as well, but you can also hear our podcast with Guthrie and also with Noam Pekelny at artistworks.com/podcast. And I hope that I maybe have named a new band here, the Trapp and Freed. I think it's watch for it here. You never know. It could happen.
All right, you guys. Thanks a bunch.
That was a
Thank
real
you
pleasure.
for a wonderful conversation and a wonderful hour. Thank you so much.
Thanks, you guys.
Bye, everybody.